Welcome to episode 5 of SIDEOUT with VNS, the volley video pod reaching out and engaging our fellow volley nerds in Nova Scotia and beyond. I'm John Elliott, the development director for VNS, and my co-host will be Megan Conroy, the technical director with VNS. You're joining the second part of our conversation with Raeesa Lalani, head coach of the ACAA women's volleyball team at the University of King's College, and Darren Russell, the head coach of the AUS women's volleyball team at St. Mary's University. In this episode, Raeesa and Darren share their thoughts on recruiting and try to fill in some of the blanks for athletes interested in playing post-secondary volleyball. Check out the time links in the video description to find a full list of topics. Enjoy. So we're going to dive into kind of our second big topic, just recruiting in general. In talking about recruiting and having a chance to maybe to speak to athletes who are interested in playing volleyball past grade 12, what would you say about when an athlete should start thinking seriously about post-secondary volleyball? I'm going to start with Darren.
That's a great question because I hear it a lot. But typically a kid in grade 10, 11, they kind of have a sense of, is this something I want to pursue after high school? And if it is, they definitely should start looking right away. Typically, most Nova Scotians or Maritimers, I find, aren't really reaching out to coaches until it's like March of that grade 12 year. And whereas if you go across the country, there's kids in BC, in grade 10, September, grade 11, contacting coaches. And typically I never recruit more than 14, and it really caps my team, just because some players will reach out to me later on in the year, and it's just, unfortunately, I'm full. And I guess that's always kind of been my philosophy of having 14 so they all can dress. But I would just, if it's something you're definitely thinking of, it never hurts to reach out to the coach with an email or a phone call or a text, or come up in person. With my schedule and Raeesa's schedule, you might not get to every club tournament or high school tournament, and I rely a lot on other coaches to reach out to me, or other athletes, just to drop me an email and say, hey, just want your thought on this, and kind of go from there.
Raeesa, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I would agree with the process. I think for us, I traditionally kind of at the beginning of grade 12 year, that's when we seem to have the most athletes reach out to us, which I think is okay for our league, because we usually kind of sign the athletes in the winter semester of our league. But one of the things that I do, and I agree with that, Darren, is kind of on that capped, is if there are people that are interested, and especially Kings, because it is so specific for different programs that you don't really see at other schools. So for us, one of the things that we always do is we always have that open invite for tryouts. If, we've already committed a number amount of players, for example, I have 2 setters. If there's a third setter that's interested, I'm not going to turn them down, but it might be more an invite to tryouts rather than a full recruiting process for them. But I think, the earlier, definitely the better. And yeah, I'll leave it there because I know there's a lot of questions that I'll touch on after.
Well, yeah, I had like a good follow-up, and then your point about let's get moving.
Great.
No, that's good. Let's talk about grades and academics. Do schools have minimum requirements for their institutions for grades coming out of high school, or even do those grades change for different programs within university? What would be the academic requirements to play post-secondary volleyball? Let's start with Ray.
Specifically with Kings, I think it's a little bit higher than some schools because, like I said, we have very specific programs. Once you're in the school, I don't think that there's, of course, there's rules for the CCAA or U Sport where you have to obtain a certain average to just be eligible as an athlete. But outside of that, I don't think there's much of a change with your grades. But for us, typically students that are coming to Kings have an over 80% average, or even to be eligible for entrance scholarships or for athletic awards. There's a lot of contingency. So, definitely work hard in school if you want to be a varsity athlete, for sure. It comes kind of hand in hand together. But yeah, I would say ours is probably traditionally a little bit higher than other schools.
Yeah. Darren, what about SMU?
Yeah, typically, it all depends on what program you're looking to get into. Just if you were just a general arts, I think you can't have any grade lower than a 65, and that might even be pushing it. But typically, once you're into SMU and you're playing any U sport at St. Mary's, you got to maintain a minimum of a 2.0 in order to keep your scholarship. If it drops below that, then you're ineligible for your scholarship. And obviously, Kings, if you have over an 80 coming in, then there's all kinds of entrance scholarships and academic scholarships that you can apply for and receive as well. And that would be above and beyond athletics. So,
yeah, I remember my follow-up question, but I'm going to ask it. So, I mean, you guys talked about, I mean, obviously in youth sport, maybe athletes, at least maybe outside of the Maritimes, are definitely starting grade 10, grade 11, a little bit earlier. I think there's maybe in the Maritimes and Nova Scotia, there's kind of a misconception that recruiting means like I'm going to wait around for a coach to reach out to me, and if like the coach doesn't reach out to me, like I'm not good enough, or like I'm not getting recruited, which obviously the rest of the country doesn't really operate that way. But maybe like, could you speak? I'll ask Darren specifically here. Could you speak to like how many athletes reach out to you versus like the diamonds you find on your own without like them reaching out to you at all? Like, is it a pretty like a lot of people you find versus find you, or is it like vice versa?
No, typically, like for instance, I kind of track how many athletes will contact me, and from this past September, I've had 63 already contact me for this coming year. And when we talk about numbers of 14, and depending on the cycle of your team, you may only have 1-2 spots open. If I am full, I always reach out to other coaches and say, hey, listen, I have a kid that's a setter looking to play somewhere. Do you have any openings? And try to, encourage, other schools. Some athletes are set, no, I definitely want to do the business program at St. Mary's. And if that's the case, we always do open tryouts as well, or, we can look at the possibilities of redshirting and this and that. But, the diamond in the roughs, once again, everyone's in the country are after them. So it's much harder to get that diamond in the rough. And, in the past, I'm always looking for that kid that wants to work hard or harder than someone else, and generally wants to do well in school and be a good human being. And those are the athletes I love coming in and working hard. So.
Yeah, great. I feel like that's a pre-staged question for all the athletes out there, being like, if you're waiting around, like that's probably not going to cut it. Like, get your butt in gear sooner rather than later, and start talking to schools. Not even about athletics, but like just start looking at schools and figuring out.
Well, and typically speaking in Canada, like I don't know many universities that start the whole recruiting process, before grade 10. However, you think the U.S., there's many U.S. schools that are looking in junior high. And I think Canada, a lot can happen between junior high and grade 10, 11, 12. And a lot of coaches are waiting to see, how that athlete develops, what kind of attitude that athlete's going to have. And, do they have the marks and the academics to even get into a post-secondary school? So.
Ray, anything you'd like to add about that ratio?
No, I think that's completely correct. I mean, for athletes that are listening and watching, like, don't hesitate, reach out, start filming some video of yourself playing. For me, that's what I did. I wanted to study journalism. So I researched all the schools in Canada that had journalism and a youth sports volleyball program. And I reached out to every single coach, and I would not have been where I am if I hadn't done that. So I think just don't expect the coaches to find you. Go find the schools and the coaches that you want, and then, steward that conversation from there.
Great. Good job. I'm glad I asked that. Maybe just really, really quickly, if you can do it justice, talk about the value of being a multi-sport athlete in your high school years and what that means transferring over to university. Ray?
I think it's really important, honestly, just even for your body physically. I mean, I'm thinking of kids that have been playing volleyball since grade 3. Like your shoulder's probably broken by grade 12 because you're repeatedly hitting a ball. So I think, there there is such a benefit for you physically to work different muscle groups, to try different things, to kind of be all encompassing as an athlete, to have, all the things that you might need. I mean, volleyball, there's specifics on the court, but do you know how to lift weights in a weight room? Do you know how to sprint properly with good form? That's going to help your volleyball in the future. So I think it just helps you become a better all-rounded athlete, and it does save your body a little bit.
Awesome. We're going to head into a little more nitty gritty about recruiting and talking about what coaches are really looking for when it comes to specific athletes. So we talked about, a best practice for athletes in terms of reaching out to you guys and saying, hey, I'm interested in your school and your volleyball program. What do you want to see in that email? What do you want to see from these athletes in that reaching out? Darren, what are you looking for? What really says, hey, I need to look further into this kid?
I guess for me, I want to know, first off, what program are you looking to go into? Some athletes will reach out and, I'm looking to do kines. Well, I'm sorry, we don't offer kines. So, and we're considered, I guess, a mid-sized school, but with the amount of programs we have, it doesn't compare to some other bigger schools. And, we got to make sure we have that program that you're interested in first. I definitely would love to see some either game tape or highlight tapes, just because I may not have the opportunity to come watch you. So I want to be able to see you play. And I love when athletes put in there what their hopes are or what their future outlooks are, because I think that really means a lot, and it will give you insight on that athlete's work habits and goals and stuff like that. So those to me are really, really big things.
Yeah. And Raeesa, if you got that email with some of the things that Darren just suggested, what's your next step then? What would you do as a coach if you get an email from an athlete saying, hey, I might be interested? What do you do?
For me personally, I really like getting to know them. So, like you were saying, the accolades are great. Knowing your resume is awesome. But for me, it's like, are you going to fit in with the team? Are you going to be someone that can get along with our teammates? Are you going to be someone that, is going to be coachable, things like that? So one thing is, athletes, we know when your parents write the emails. I want to throw that out there. We know when your parents are writing the emails. I want to hear from you. I want to get to know you as a person. If I can, obviously it's hard to do with every athlete depending on the numbers, but I like kind of having that video call with them, setting up a time to chat, or even on the phone, but just to get to know them as a person. And I don't even like talking about volleyball for the first 15 minutes. Like, I want to know who you are. That's important to us. When we're your coach, our intent is to be your mentor, is to help you get through these stages in your life for the next ones. So obviously, we want to see if you're talented. Send that game tape. That is a big factor. That is important. I like highlight reels and full sets personally, just because then I can see the good stuff, but also see what their demeanor is on the court. What is their body language on the court? That helps us to find them out as athletes. But just communicate with those coaches. Be yourself, be real, tell us who you are, tell us what your goals are, and if you're a fit, or if we are intrigued by you, we are going to continue those conversations.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And you kind of hit on one, parents writing the email, and I'm gonna throw it back to you right away, Raeesa. What are some don'ts in the recruiting process? What sends some red flags? What kind of makes you go, maybe not?
I mean, because I'm an English major, of course, I'm going to be like, ooh, grammar, spelling, all that kind of stuff. But it's true. Like, take your time and write those emails. You're reaching out to us. You have one shot to get our attention. So, make sure you're stringing it together. It's also, you're applying for school. You're going to have to do that properly. We want to see that, you can fit in with the school academically as well. I think also just making sure that, like, if we respond or if we ask questions, answer those, rather than kind of beating around the bush, because obviously we're trying to get some information from you. So take your time. Like, you don't have to, if I send you an email today, you don't have to respond 30 seconds later. Take your time, sit with it, look at it, read it, go through it, formulate your responses, double check it a few times. Like, this is you know, like I said, it's your one chance to get a shot at this. So do it well and do it properly.
And Darren, what about you? So outside of maybe how the athlete's communicating with you, any, do coaches look at the whole athlete? There's social media, there's other things. Are there any things that would concern you about an athlete potentially coming to you or getting recruited to your school? Any red flags?
Well, I'm not a big social media guy, so unfortunately I don't do that stuff and snoop. But I agree with everything Race just said, in the sense that write your email yourself. I've had several emails come through, and it's been cut and paste, or it's been sent to 100 different coaches.
Right.
And I want something to really show I'm interested in St. Mary's or the school I'm at. If it's a generic email, I typically skip over those, because I know, you're not really set on coming to our school. So
Right.
I typically look at those. And obviously, I've had some parents will write an email and just say, hey, my daughter's looking to be recruited. What are your thoughts? And it's like, well, your daughter should be, advertising herself rather than you. So I think those are big.
Yeah, that's great. And I like your comment. As soon as you talk about sending out a mass email, you picture somebody in the old school, like mail outs, just putting like 100 of these recruitment, letters into the mail, and email is our current day version of that. So personalization of emails and showing that you really have an interest in that school and your program sounds like can go a long way for athletes.
Can I touch on the social media one?
Absolutely. Right. That's a strike right up your alley. I should have fired that one to you.
Sure. It is funny, because I know even from like when I was a player, you would never kind of be on social media with your coaches. You know, you don't have them as friends and things like that. But I think now it is so accessible. And it definitely, like for me, even as my current players, and I'll go back to recruits after, like I can see what you're doing. So if we have a 24-hour drinking rule, I know when you're out. I might also be out because I'm an adult. So, kind of just having a little bit of that intelligence behind that. But even, for those high school students, think of it as, if your parents aren't following you on Instagram, or you're posting stuff that you won't want your family members to see, your coaches probably shouldn't be seeing those things either. And I think those are big deterrents, because, we talk to other coaches about, their personalities and who they are as people. But for someone like me, social media is part of my job. I'm on it all the time. I am going to go look at your accounts. I am going to go and preview and see who you are, because that is going to help formulate my opinion. And if I see things that I don't like, that might be a strike.
But also playing post-secondary sports, even, something other than volleyball, you're a role model, and you do have to really take into account what you are putting out there, because there's always younger kids or younger people watching and reading. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great point, Darren. And I mean, if you look at a lot of our national team athletes and even a lot of our youth sport and CCAA athletes, I mean, they have their profiles are designed to be seen and to create buzz around their teams and what they're doing. And a lot of athletes put a lot of time into creating those profiles that can be liked, can be shared, and can be followed, and that helps promote themselves, helps promote their sport. So I mean, that's social media could be, I'm sure, a whole other episode, but it's a great point to not only is it something that might be considered when recruiting, but it's going to be something that's definitely scrutinized once you become a varsity athlete as well, and what you put out into the world.
Well, and especially if you are on scholarship, there are some rules that you could lose your scholarship based on something you post or something you say as well. So you got to be very careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Megan, like, and I know you're a big proponent of this, and like athletes kind of creating like a second profile, or like their sport profile. And I mean, you'll have lots of parents or athletes say, well, I'll just make my profile private. But I mean, really, it's a chance to advertise yourself. It's marketing if you're a high school student, or if you're a university student, or definitely if you're a professional athlete. It's like you want to put your best foot forward, but maybe your coaches or prospective coaches don't need to see every selfie that you take. So like it's a you can have your private account, but like having a sports specific account where you have a few video clips or some photos, some updates, it can be a pretty powerful tool for any athlete, whether you're trying to get recruited or you've already been recruited.
Absolutely. So looking at, again, kind of going back to an athlete frame of mind, I want to play post-secondary. I've written, a really great email that I've sent to, each of you guys respectively about coming to your school. What kind of questions would you guys ask of athletes once you start that conversation with them? What are some things that you, some other things, you mentioned a couple of things that you feel are important, or what kind of questions you think or do you like to be asked by the athlete? Either anything jump to mind off the bat? Raeesa, what do you think?
One of the questions that has come about a lot this year is the athletes just asking, how does it work? What does the team look like? What is the league? What is the schedule? All that kind of stuff. I don't mind answering that just to kind of help educate them on that. I mean, all of that is available online anyways, but if that's kind of the banter that we're having, that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. I mean, for me, it's kind of like I touched on, getting to know the person first, but then it's kind of down to business. So like, hey, have you applied? What are your grades like? If you're intending to get a scholarship, we have those conversations. So we kind of have a process that we go through that's just been given to me from the athletic department. So it's really, send it to us, we get to know you as a person, then we get down to the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah, Darren, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And, the big thing, I get is, when are our practices? Is it going to interfere with my school? How often are we practicing pretty generic stuff?
Yeah, trying to get a sense of what their daily life could be like as an athlete at your school.
Okay, like definitely ask that, because you don't want to come in and get shocked about something that you weren't prepared for. So the more questions, the better for me.
Awesome. All right, last kind of, this is a juicy question. I think there's lots of athletes who want to know what the answers to this one might be. So if we're talking athletes on your roster by positions, setters, middles, outside hitters, liberos, DSs, I'm going to ask you guys, what are some qualities you're looking for in each of those positions? And it's okay if you say ditto. It's okay if you have something different to add. But we're going to go through each of those positions. If I'm a 10th grade, setter sitting at home, Darren, what are you looking for as a setter in the AUS at St. Mary's? What kind of qualities? And that this can be like probably more so on court, but could be some off court qualities as well.
For all my athletes, I want good people. I want people that want to do well in school first, volleyball second. There's nothing that makes me more proud than, these athletes graduating and contributing to society. I think that's better than winning anything for me. So that's definitely important. But for any athlete or a setter, I just want hard work. I don't care about height as much. I know some coaches want, the taller athlete, but I want a kid that is going to go through a wall to get a ball or just work their tail off just to show people.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great qualities, especially in your setters, but I can see how that applies to any position through and through. Raeesa, anything for setters?
Yeah, for me, for setters, one thing that I look at is their ability to lead, because the setters, are the quarterbacks of the team, they say, but they are the ones who are running the show. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like outspoken and outgoing. You can be a quiet leader too. But for me, something that's really important is like that setter, they're going to be talking to me or our setting coach, Abby, more times than some of the other players are going to be, because we're going to be asking about your decisions. We're going to be asking about what you should do in certain situations. So, having that volleyball IQ, studying the game a little bit, kind of having that coach hat on as well. And then being a leader so that you can kind of rally your team is really important for me in the setting position.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's jump into middles. So typically, some taller players, definitely some agility involved. Anything that really for a middle athlete, Raeesa, for you that sticks out, maybe that's different than another position?
Like, you took the word out of my mouth, agility. That's something that I really noticed. And that's something, we can go through the technique of proper blocking technique, proper arm technique and hitting. But for us, one thing that really stands out to me, if I have a blocker that's fast, that has a lot of stamina, that, you know, has that cardio so that they can close a block, that's like the first thing I look at when I'm looking at a middle. I think the rest can be trained, but just, you know, being agile, being quick, I think those are really, really important for middles to be.
Yeah. Okay. Darren, anything to add to that?
Well, those were the two I was going to say, agility and speed. But even to add to that, I love middles that are very good at reading the play. So able to read the setter, and, you know, it really helps with the speed of the game to get out there and close the block. So I would throw those three out there.
Oh, I love it. Reading. See, athletes, cue reading is important.
It's hard. You gotta learn that. It's hard. You gotta learn.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
So,
It's not. It doesn't seem like a physical skill or a technical skill, but I would maybe go on record as saying the most important skill. I'm gonna die on that hill, I think. And then what about outside hitters? Darren, what are you looking for? You know, left side, right side, any of those positions? What are some key kind of elements for those athletes?
I love corner hitters that can pass the ball first, because it's very important. But I like the unpredictability. You know, Race, you were very unpredictable as a left side. We didn't know if she was hitting line, hitting cross, rolling it, and unpredictability for any athlete keeps you on your toes for sure.
Yeah, Ray, anything to add? Outside hitters?
First of all, thank you.
A few lefties might be helpful.
Crafty, so I appreciate hearing that. I definitely agree with passing. I think passing is a big one for me as an outside hitter. I mean, outside hitters are the most well-rounded players on the court. They serve, they pass, they block, they hit, you know, they play defense. They have to do a lot of things. So having that back row, for me, I think is the most important to start, even over being a good hitter. Obviously we still want you to be a good hitter, but I think just that back row, like that's what's going to keep the plays going. That's where it's going to come down to. Then you have your ringer hitters. That's great. And outside hitters, if you're the ringers, that's awesome too. But I think we need to always put the heavy importance on passing and defense, which I think is underrated because hitting is more fun. That's fine. That's fair.
True. And certainly last but not least, liberos, defensive specialists. Darren, talk about running through walls. You've got one of those for sure, who will literally go through a brick wall to get a ball.
Yeah.
What are some qualities in those athletes that you get excited about when you see them?
Yeah, definitely the attitude that ball is not going to hit the floor no matter what. Like Ray said, with setters, able to, you know, run the offense. For me, the libero is the person that's going to run my defense. They're able to read where the hitter's going to go with the ball, and they just run that ball down and get it up. They're loud on the defensive side of the floor, and the other players know exactly where they're going to be because they're loud. They're communicating so well. So I look for all those qualities.
Ray, anything to add for those defensive specialists?
I definitely agree with the hustle. One thing that the word that just came to my mind as, you know, Darren was talking is confidence. I think that's a really big one for liberos and defensive specialists, because you're passing and you're playing defense. You've got two jobs and that's what you have to do. And you're going to, you know, if you're a really good libero, hopefully people are not going to serve you, but you are probably going to get a high volume of balls. And like you said, you know, having that leadership, but also just being really confident and putting that with hustle, I think is what makes someone a more outstanding libero or defensive specialist.
Yeah, great point. And really quick question for both of you to finish off this section. Do your liberos set your second ball in your system that you typically run with your team? Darren?
Yeah, definitely. My middles are always the ones that want to be the setter, but typically our liberos will jump in and set the ball. Yeah.
Okay, so the ability to set a ball in and out of system kind of scenario, it would be pretty important for you guys. Raeesa?
Well, it depends on my players. This is a tough one to answer. Traditionally, yes, our liberos, and so I'm saying liberos definitely, you know, work on setting that ball for sure. One of our middles this year, for example, was a setter and has like incredibly great hands and just will like chuck a back set and it'll come out smooth. So we did change our system to cater to the talent that we had. So I think that's, you know, just something I think, and that kind of hits on it for everything, is like being an all-rounded player as a libero, like still, have good topspin, be able to hit that ball. I think being all-rounded and having all technical aspects of the game will only just better you as a player and better your team. So that, for example, my middle that used to be a setter, I want her to take second ball all the time because she's got great hands. So just being an all-rounded player would be my thing, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I know, Darren, you are the same way, because I've seen you use athletes in a multitude of positions based on the personnel that you have. And one of the things we really strive to have a consistent message of with Team Nova Scotia and our provincial team athletes is the ability to play a variety of positions and the ability to be as appealing as you can make yourself to those post-secondary coaches. Because I can speak from personal experience. I played middle my entire life until I got to university, and they're like, no, you're not going to play middle. I couldn't play middle with the speed that the game, I played meter ball life in high school. Middle was great. Once it got into quicker offensive systems, I just didn't have the speed to block in the middle. So off to the right side I went and learned a new position, and it was great for me. It fit with me. But that shock of entering a university and all of a sudden having to play a different position was a struggle. So trying to really emphasize that to our young athletes of being versatile, be prepared to play different positions, makes you a little bit more appealing to be recruited.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Johnny.
Yeah. Things that come to mind, if you look at the game, even within Canada, but definitely internationally, like it's almost every position now needs to be able to do everything. You see big middles for Brazilian national team who are like, setting a quicker tempo offense out of system because they have those volleyball skills they have to execute. So again, if the more appealing, you can be more appealing as an athlete if you're a globally trained athlete, whether you play multiple positions or not. Like being able to do multiple things is a good thing. You guys are answering questions without even me asking them, which is amazing. So I'm going to jump ahead here. And you both kind of answered this. I was going to ask if your league support athletic scholarships, and the answer was yes to both of yours. But maybe just take 1 or 2 minutes each to explain how they work. Is it a number of scholarships you have available per team? Is it a dollar amount you have, which can be like divided up like a pie? Like how do scholarships athletically work at your schools? And we'll start with Raeesa.
Sure. So we have 2 different ones. We have the athletic awards, which is just a certain amount of money that myself and our athletic department decide what the athletes are going to get. So actually that's good to say. For the athletes, you can't, a lot of athletes do reach out to me and ask if there's, financial aid or scholarships available, which is a totally fair question. But it does come and gets decided from the athletic department and the coaching staff, and then we'll get divvied out to the players. But we do also have another one called the Dean Little Scholarship, which is an incredible scholarship. There is a contingency for a certain grade that you do have to maintain over the years to keep getting it. But that one, there is the ability to apply online and say that you're interested. So if you're eligible for your GPA, and if you're taking the programs that are eligible for it as well, that one you can actually apply to it. But once again, it gets decided by the athletic department and the coaching staff. And
is that for the volleyball team specifically, or is that a scholarship that's shared by the double?
All athletics at Kings.
Great. Darren, what about St. Mary's?
I'm fortunate I can decide what each player is getting myself with our athletic scholarship. There are academic scholarships, and that's all based on what the athlete's marks are. But typically I can divvy up whatever I want. Within U Sport, the most you can get in Canada would be full tuition and fees associated. We can't cover room and board and food and any of that stuff. And typically I always put mine in writing. Some coaches don't because they could change year to year, but I type mine up. And for the most part, it's for the parents because they're the ones usually paying for post-secondary. So at least they have an idea how much minimum that their son and daughter would be getting. And, typically as the years go on, I can increase it unless they are getting a full amount and kind of go from there. A lot could be based on needs. So if I only have 2 middles and I need to bring in a third, there might be more money available than having 5 liberos, say, or something like that. So
great. I guess, I mean, you said something that kind of brings it up. And Darren, you mentioned that you typically love to have kind of about 14 athletes in the gym. So Raeesa, I'll ask you, do you have a kind of a number that you like to stick around, either a minimum or a maximum?
At the moment, no, I don't. But you know, with the interest that is coming as our team keeps growing, like exploring the options of red shirts, that's definitely something that's kind of at the forefront of my mind now. I definitely like carrying 2 setters. We had 3 last year. I wasn't opposed to it, just because of the talent that we had. But one of our setters became an outside hitter for us. So once again, it goes back to that being malleable. I don't have a specific number, but for me, it's definitely the ability to have kind of a competitive and deep bench. That's something that I, really want to build and have that. And then just having that versatility as well. We also, like I said, have access to 1 court. So that's a consideration to keep in mind, because I don't want my athletes on the side missing out on reps. So it really depends on the year. It depends on the interest, or, at the tryouts. And that's something our coaching staff kind of just makes a decision during that tryout period and then stick with it.
Great. Darren, you kind of have your 14. What would you say, like, if you had to kind of divide up by position? I know that could change year to year. Like, how many per position would you like to see?
Typically we do 2 setters. Now we also ran 3 setters a couple years ago. We have a 2 libero system in U Sports, so I typically take 2 liberos, and I try to stagger them so one could be year 3 where one's year 1. Typically we do 3 to 4 middles, and then the rest would kind of be our pin hitters. But once again, it's the same as what Raeesa was saying. It all depends on the year and how many people will be graduating this year and how many may be coming back. So you really, when I do my recruiting, I'm almost looking 3 years in advance to kind of see where we're going to be. And with this whole virus thing this year, if there isn't a season or a half a season, and eligibility may not be used, it definitely puts the whole recruiting on a spotlight, making it harder for one end. But then if you get all those players coming back without using eligibility, it makes it harder to bring in new players if you are going to cap a team. So it's a juggling act for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, something I heard.
A few wrenches thrown in this year.
Wrenches. That's a good way to say it. Yeah, 2 things I heard from both of you is talking about like competitive practicing. I mean, like you want the battles in your home gym to prepare you for the battles you're going to have with people wearing different colored jerseys. So the value of having a deep bench is really important, and that's probably universal to like any age of club volleyball, any gender. And I think the other thing also is to take into account is, not everyone's going to play, or definitely not everyone's going to play, equally. So when you're talking to those prospective athletes, like, it's about having the right. So if you have 14, I'm sure you're probably putting you want everyone to be a great person, but it's probably even a bigger deal for those kids that are like maybe the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. Like, what are they going to be doing on your bench and in your practices when playing time on the weekend isn't there? And you guys both mentioned multiple times, like, how much it's about having the right people. It's not the best people, the best players. It's having the right people. So kudos to you guys.
I have one thing I'd like to add to that I've kind of learned from player coaching perspective. I think one thing that I've really learned that maybe I needed or did receive, depending, is just the communication. So for example, like we do, after we have our tryouts, we do kind of an initial individual meeting with all the coaches and individual players, and we talk about their goals, we talk about what they want, we do team goals and setting in that. But I think one of the things that has come up a few times with my players is just not understanding what their role is, and me as a coach needing to communicate and make sure that I can't just assume that, oh, you're my fire plug, when I need you, you spark the team up. Like, I actually need to go and tell you that is who you are for me, because I think that puts players at ease and kind of, I don't want to say false hope, because I think everyone should work hard. Everyone should try and earn their spot on the court, and it's, you're on a team to do that. But just the back and forth communication between players and coaches, I think that's something that I want to highlight is really important. And as a coach, I've learned that I need to do that, better and more. And same thing from the athlete side. If you're unsure or if you don't know what's going on, like, ask to have a meeting with me. I'm always going to say yes, because if we're on the same page, we're going to all have a better dynamic.
So that'd be a similar story for you too, Darren, in terms of that communication?
She hit the nail on the head for sure. For me, taking 14 players is important because I do want every player to have a role. When you get into players with 17, 18, 19, where maybe they're not dressing, maybe they're sitting out of practices, it's so easy for one of those players in that particular position to feel they don't have a role. And it's important to me to connect with the players and make sure everyone understands, this is the journey we're on. This is your role you're on. This year in particular, we never used all our starters until after Christmas due to injuries. So those players that were 10, 11, 12, 13 were getting into meaningful games where either they had to serve, had to pass, had to hit. And, I just think if the player knows their role and the potential of their role, it just adds to that whole team unity. So definitely important.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, one thing I just want to, and Darren, I'll get you to clarify this. We've mentioned a couple of times red shirts. Do you want to just let those who are watching, what is a red shirt? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so typically teams will take more than the allowance. So in youth sports, we're allowed to dress 14 players for every game. So if you're number 15 or 16, some coaches will rotate you in and through. If a coach isn't planning on dressing you for any home game, they would consider you as a red shirt. And basically, you wouldn't use up any eligibility. You're still able to practice. You're able to travel. You just wouldn't be dressing for any league games and therefore not using your eligibility up. So it's a year of development to kind of see maybe where you fit in or to get you to that level that you need to be for the next season. So
awesome. Yes, spent my first year in CIS as it was at the time as a red shirt, but it was the ability to the alternative was you get cut. So as an athlete in my first year, it was a chance to, like you said, to be at practice, to actually get better, in a hope that the coach obviously saw something that they thought could develop or might develop. So giving me the opportunity to do that without burning a year of eligibility, sitting on a bench, or just there wasn't room on the roster that year. So just so athletes know, that is still another kind of role that does exist out there in post-secondary sport.
Well, and like Raeesa touched on earlier, it also gives the coach an opportunity to actually learn more about that athlete. How are they going to handle themselves when they're not dressing? Are they still a team player? Are they still a good fit with this team? So, it kind of goes both ways, and it is definitely beneficial for sure.
Yeah, it's a good character building year. You're right.
Even athletes who get injured, sometimes they're redshirted in their third or fourth year, depending. So it's kind of a nice way to still be involved in the team if you can't actually physically play.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Lots of flexibility here, I'm hearing, with when you guys find somebody who you really want to have involved with your team, there's some different possibilities out there other than a rostered position. Here's a big question for athletes that are out there. What happens if I don't get recruited? So I'm right now, I'm in grade 12. I've finished school. Let's take out the fact that we're in a pandemic. I know I'm going to St. Mary's. That's where I'm going to school. I've gotten in. It has the program I want. I wanted to play volleyball. I didn't get recruited. What is that like? Is there any hope for me to play volleyball? Darren, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I have about 5 now. Contact the coach. Let them know I'm coming there. I'm definitely interested in playing. No matter who I have committed, I still do an open tryout. The last number of years, we've always had kind of one walk-on make the team. And, it gives us an opportunity, or us as a coaching staff, an opportunity to see you against some of these other players and see where you fit. And maybe there is an opportunity to redshirt for a year to develop. So definitely reach out to the coach. And, in some cases, if the program is full and there is no open tryouts, that coach can definitely set you up with an intramural league, a co-ed league, a senior league. There's all kinds going on around Halifax, or usually every province you're in, to keep playing the sport that you love.
And Raeesa, I'll throw the same question to you with the add-on of, have you ever seen an athlete not make a team one year and make a team a following year, either in your time as an athlete or as a coach?
I definitely have. And I think that's exactly it is, first things first is reach out so you're on our radar. If you don't make it, there might be another role for you. I know sometimes, maybe you want to coach with the team, or maybe you want to be a team manager, or maybe there's another way that you can be involved. But like Darren said, we're really connected in the volleyball world. We can find ways to help you continue playing. And if you really are that type of person that you didn't make it this year, but you have that gut fire that you really want to do it, work hard, ask for our team training programs. We'll give that to you. Make sure you're getting touches, go play on those intramural leagues. Cause you can definitely make the team if you work hard the next year. It doesn't end there, but you have to know that you're going to have to put in the work to do it, and more work than the people that are already on the team, because they're already getting those built-in practices and they're getting all those touches and everything. So if you really care about it, but the one thing that I would even say with that is learn who you are as an athlete and be realistic with your goals. I think that's something that athletes kind of need to hear. Like, for example, with me, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but for me, I was an undersized athlete out west, and I knew that I wanted to be a hitter. I didn't want to be a libero because my favorite thing is hitting, which I know I just said don't let that be a little while ago, but it is what it is. And so I decided to come out east because I knew that I would have a better career out here. I knew that the program would be a better fit for me, and we got fourth at national. That's a big deal. So be realistic with who you are. And, I think that's something, even we're talking about youth sport and CCAA, people didn't realize, and I honestly didn't know until I started coaching at Kings about the ACAA. Like, I had no idea that this even existed. But, there's all levels of talent, there's all levels of commitment, and there are opportunities for athletes to play post-secondary in so many different ways and at so many different levels. So understand who you are, pick out your academic goals, but give yourself an opportunity to be the best that you can be. And that doesn't mean you have to be at that top school. It could mean that you could be a star in a different conference, or it could mean that, you have opportunities elsewhere. So a little realism.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, like, I can definitely speak to that. As an athlete growing up in Newfoundland, we only had one option. You went to MUN and you made the team, or like you didn't. And every now and then an athlete would leave and go to a different university to play, which is more prevalent now than it was certainly when I was coming through. I didn't know the ACAA existed at the time. And there's like a whole slew of players I grew up playing with that I'm confident could have had amazing careers in ACAA schools and had no idea it existed. The ACAA coaches at the time didn't come to Newfoundland to recruit, or very rarely. And again, now I think the world is different now. The communication and the awareness is there, but that's a great point. Darren, still thinking along those lines of if you reflect back on your rosters you've had over the years, have you ever had a walk-on player become a star, become an impactful player on your program?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just the number of years, even with my current team, Mariana Sill, who she was done playing volleyball after Canada Games, and reached out and said, I think I'm interested in trying out. Can I try out? And I'm like, absolutely. And then, we started her off as a red shirt, and then due to injury, it's like, okay, no, your red shirt's done. You're in the game. And she played very, very well for her first real year this year. And we're excited to see her grow and develop over these next few years, but it definitely happens for sure.
That's awesome. I didn't know that was her story. She did have a fantastic season this year, like some major like impactful games. So that's really cool to hear. Awesome. Thinking of your average first year athlete coming into your school, what are maybe 2 to 3 things that you've seen first year athletes really struggle with, that you could kind of give them a heads up now to maybe prepare for? Raeesa, can you think of a couple of things?
One that was really prevalent for us this year was homesickness. As you know, we have started recruiting out of province athletes who are traveling away from their families. It's going to be hard, and it's okay. And one thing that you have to remember is, you know, when you're a varsity athlete, you're in a position where you are with a bunch of people that are now your family, and you know, you're lucky that you kind of have that opportunity. But it is okay if you're having tough days. It is okay if you're feeling homesick. There's always going to be challenges. It's just how resilient are you going to be to those challenges, or who are you going to lean on for support? Is it your coaching staff? Is it your players? That was one that I think if an athlete knows that it's okay that you're going to feel the way you feel, there might be an easier process or a better outcome if you kind of already expect that. The other thing, which I actually learned from the coaching perspective, is not taking for granted. Like, I know we always talk about, like, come in with good nutrition, come in with strength and conditioning, work out, do all those things. And, you know, I see my athlete, they're very fit. They're obviously, you know, they must work out. And then we go to the gym and they haven't lifted a weight before. And you're just like, whoa, I didn't realize that. So I think from an athlete's perspective is preparation and, you know, self-teaching. There's so many things out there. There's so many resources out there, even just looking online. A little bit of preparation for that. But if you don't know, ask, because we might assume, and that's something, you know, for me as a coach, I'm like, okay, no, I can't assume that anymore. And you know, I've got that at the back of my head. But if you don't know what you're doing, whether it's school, whether it's, you know, time management, whether it's nutrition, whether it's strength and conditioning, ask. We're your resource. We're here to help mentor you. So don't be afraid to communicate with us and ask.
Yeah, those are two, you know, so, you know, definitely going to miss home. But even if you're a local athlete, you're still not home very much. You don't get much time to spend with your friends. So kind of missing that former life is definitely something that can impact a first year player, as well as really learning to be prepared in a whole bunch of different facets. Darren, anything else to add that you've seen some first year athletes really struggle with?
Yeah, I got three big ones. One is first year athletes coming in, really not knowing the speed of the game nowadays. Coming in your first year, you're playing against older women, and you can really, it's an eye opener, the speed, how fast these girls are, how hard they hit nowadays. And a lot of them aren't, I guess, privy to that. Besides that, you know, like Ray said, you know, how am I going to balance school and volleyball practice and social lives? And it's very, very hard. You know, being on scholarship at a university, you almost have to look at it as, well, this is my job. You know, school, then volleyball, and then everything else is behind that. And for some first year athletes, being away from mom and dad, someone waking them up in the morning and cooking their food, it's a huge adjustment. And that those have been really big struggles. I guess the third one would be, you know, just goal setting. And some come in with really, really unattainable goals, like, oh, I'm going to be MVP of the league my first year. And then they show up and, you know, they're your 12th, 13th, 14th player that's not getting as much playing time. And, you know, I always say, well, you know, be realistic with your goals. You know, you want to obviously set some goals a little bit higher than others, but, you know, as a first year, you need to really come in and absorb what's going on around you, and talk to the players, talk to the coaches, ask questions like Raeesa was saying, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, definitely. I think whenever you're moving up a level in any sport, maybe in life, there's always sometimes an expectation of this is going to be just like the previous level. I was an all-star on my team. I was MVP at Nova Scotia championships. And then, you know, the minute you walk into that next gym, sometimes you feel, although you might be a little intimidated, you feel like, well, it's only a matter of time before I can achieve this level. For some of those athletes, that can absolutely be the case, but there could be some different paths there, is kind of what I'm hearing. And trying to figure that out as an 18-year-old coming in on your own can definitely be a struggle.
In most cases, that athlete coming in was an all-star or a leader of their team. Now you're also with 12 other all-stars that were also leaders on their team as well. And, you know, it's got to be realistic.
Yeah. And it's definitely, I mean, physically, mentally, emotionally, like you said, you're playing against some athletes who in some cases might be 4 or 5, sometimes years older than you, and life experience, playing experience, all those things come into play that, you know, it's not the same thing as walking into your club practice. And I think the key thing there with all of those things, looking for support, I'm hearing that from both of you guys, being patient is another big thing, to give yourself, be realistic with the time, and give yourself time to adjust and begin to kind of set some of those goals, and set realistic goals to maybe work your way to whatever your path is going to look like. That's some great advice, guys.
Yeah, 2 things that stuck with me, like, and you just kind of hit that nail again, Megan, was at no point in your club volleyball career will you have been playing athletes that are 4 to 5 years older than you.
Yeah.
So like, it's a first, and it's often a surprise for athletes when they arrive at first year, like it's obvious, but it's not obvious. So like, just mentally preparing yourself. And I love how, Darren, you said it, like everyone has been an all-star or a leader at some point in their club or high school volleyball career. So like, it's a different level. Prepare yourself for it. And I just, like, you know, you both kind of mentioned the emphasis on just like physical fitness and nutrition. And I think a lot of people think like, I got to work out so I can be a star. But like, really, like, the amount of volleyball you play in club and high school to what a 6 practices a week plus a couple of matches. I mean, I think we've all seen or played with athletes that are broken, you know, in their first or second year, because it's not a question of how good a volleyball player they are. It's just their bodies were not physically able to handle how often they were on the court. And, you know, that affected the volleyball part of their post-secondary career. So, you know, get your body right so it can handle that training load. And it's not about whether you're a starter or not. It's like, can you even train?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, we are almost at the end of our time together. This is definitely going to be split into 2 episodes. There's so much information here, and I'm sure I could keep both of you for like another 2 hours to talk about all these topics. I know our athletes and our members are going to be just drooling over this information, and so thank you guys for coming on board. But I got a few more questions. They're my favorite questions of every interview we do. Number 1, I'm going to go to both of you guys. Raeesa, I'm going to start with you. What are the top 2 to 3 pieces of advice for coaches or athletes out there kind of thinking about the topics that we've covered today, or just even coaching in general?
Ooh, you should have gone with Darren first so I can formulate my thoughts. So I'll touch on the recruiting one. For advice on that is reach out. If you take one thing away from this, reach out to coaches, do your research, and then reach out. I'll say reach out one more time just in case you didn't get it.
To be clear.
Just to be clear. Another piece of advice that I would give from the coaching front, for me, I was very much a player turned into a coach, just kind of the way that it worked for me, which I'm really glad that I have that experience that I can bring into it. And something that I have learned is coaching is a totally different ball game, and it's beautiful. And it's taken me a few years to like get my feet in it and understand how it goes. But for all of the players who might want to turn into coaches, you know, I never thought I was going to. I'll be honest. I thought that, you know, when I was done my varsity career, I still wanted to be around volleyball. I was kind of a practice player, a little bit of an assistant coach with the Kings team. And then I started realizing what some of the benefits that I personally found from it were amazing. So, you know, players take, you know, once you're done your careers, or even, you know, if you're in high school, go try and coach, go help assistant coach different teams. Because it takes me to my third point is I wish I did more as a player, because I would be so good now if my body worked properly because of all the things that I know. It's crazy. I think just learning and putting that other hat on as a coach, like I feel like I know the game so much more now that I'm like, oh, I wish I was 20 and playing at Dal right now, because the things I could come up with. So that would be some advice for people, is to try both hats, because you never know which one's going to fit with you.
True. That's why all of us like old lady teams can beat younger teams, because we're smart.
Yeah, because we're so smart.
Bodies can't do what they used to, but the brain is working better.
Exactly.
Darren, how about you? What's a couple pieces of advice for those out there watching?
For recruits, absolutely reach out to the coach, ask questions, put yourself out there. You're your biggest salesperson. So, publicize yourself as much as possible. As for the coach out there that's looking for more, once again, reach out to other coaches. I am a coach that I always have open practices, and I have several coaches throughout the year. They just want to come in and watch, or and I'm one, come on down, hit some balls and put them to work. There's a wealth of knowledge in this province or right across Canada. And if you just reach out to the coach, you'd really be surprised that they're usually open to having you come in and work with your kids. So definitely do that.
That's amazing. That's such we're so grateful and privileged in this province to have some fantastic folks like yourselves, as well as a lot of the other coaches we've had on, leading some programs. And every single gym in our province is open. And the fact that you guys as coaches are willing to open your doors. And I think, I don't know, when I was getting into coaching volleyball, it felt a little more closed door. You held your cards a little closer to your chest, and the transformation I've seen, in Canada, as you say, Darren, into sharing information, being open, supporting each other, even like within leagues and conferences, and the communication between coaches and learning from each other. It's made volleyball in Canada so much better, because you're not kind of on your lone island in your own four walls of your own concrete gym in the middle of wherever you are doing your thing by yourself. There's a community out there willing to support you. So the fact that you guys are both willing to do that and have done it in the past, I know, and are continuing to do that and share your knowledge is just such a huge asset to anybody in our province, for sure. Now, my most favorite question, the most important one of all. What are your top 1, 2, max 3 restaurants in Nova Scotia that John and I and everybody else watching need to hit up? We have an amazing list started, and it doesn't need to be in HRM, it can be anywhere. So Darren, I'm looking for some good, churro eats, if you have any in your back pocket. Raeesa, I'll start with you.
Thank you.
Okay. This is not for the athletes. This is for the coaches, because this is not very nutritious. But Shaw's Landing out by Peggy's Cove has the best lobster grilled cheese I've ever had in my life. And
it's a good time of year to have lobster.
Oh, and it's open right now. You can go get takeout.
Oh,
that would be one. My favorite restaurant in Halifax is the Stubborn Goat. Downtown.
So good.
They have a really good 4-cheese pizza. Am I giving menu recommendations or just for restaurants?
I mean, I'll take whatever you got. Their mac and cheese is such a classic.
And another one, which is a very nice spot with your loved ones. It's called Julep, and it's also downtown Halifax.
Awesome. Love it. Darren, what do you got?
I'm a steak and potato guy. My ultimate restaurant I love is Cut. That's in Halifax. Barrington Steakhouse is amazing. The cake's amazing.
Is that on the SMU Athletics visa?
Oh God, I wish. If you were going towards Truro, I would highly recommend the Masstown Market has a great seafood restaurant there. Those would,
awesome.
Next to Daryl's, who all three of you guys eat regularly, is way up there.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I think Daryl's they're gonna have to become a sponsor of our podcast. They've been mentioned on every single episode, I think.
I'm totally a creature of habit, and I go to the same place, and that's it.
Yeah. Oh, now I need a steak. It's like the sun is shining, and it's time for a barbecue, Darren. You're making me hungry.
Oh.
We're encroaching on supper time here. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys, for joining us, Darren and Raeesa, for giving us a whole bunch of your time today and sharing your knowledge. It was so much fun chatting with you guys and learning more about your programs, about you guys, and again, sharing your knowledge. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and it's my pleasure. I'd love to do it again. Thanks.
Awesome. Good. You're back on the list for a future episode. Perfect. So again, thanks to all our viewers who are watching. This was episode 4 of Side Out with VNS, and probably episode 5, because I think we're definitely gonna split this into 2 episodes. We're really excited to bring you guys more episodes in the future. We have lots of great planning done, and some more people in our province to reach out to share some of their knowledge with all of you. So please make sure you subscribe on our YouTube page so you get notifications for new posts. We have a first for episode 5 coming up. We're going live next week for a Q&A with some amazing athletes from Nova Scotia that have gone on to do some pretty incredible things. So stay tuned this week for how to get on the live Q&A and to find out who our guests are. So we'll talk to you guys soon.